So, Ennis, can you introduce yourself? Tell our audience who you are and what you do.
My name is EnnisFlowers, and I work for a company by the name of Unified Consultants Group, and I am their transportation manager. Unified Consultants Group is a multifaceted logistics company. Our focus is a broad range of DoD consultant work, and we're also responsible for doing physical security for between 8 and 900 of the Social Security Administration buildings where we go through and provide the physical security for them. And I help coordinate the movement of materials across the country. We try to team with companies that have our best interest in mind, and we found that to be the case when we teamed up with CMIT. Unfortunately, prior to CMIT coming on board with us, we had a real bird's nest on our communication side. When we brought CMIT on board, they were able to actually help solidify that, help us kind of restructure that whole part of it. And we have over 300 odd people in the field, not only inside of the United States, but we also have personnel that are on the ground in Qatar and Kuwait. And it's very important that they will be able to get into our sites from a global perspective. So when CMIT came on board and was able to help us speed that process up and streamline that, it made all of our communications more effective and also made everybody a little bit more profitable for the company. So CMIT put us on the fast-track interstate way to get from point A to point B. The other companies we were dealing with in the past, although they were able to fulfill our needs at the time, would give us the scenic route. Prior to CMIT, we would come into the office and there would be times where the server wouldn't be on at all.
Just on an average, when it was out, how many hours might it be down?
It could be down anywhere from 3 to 4 hours.
Oh,
and
wow.
then once it came back up, there was still the process of, all right, now we got to figure out why it went down. One of the other crucial points that pushed us towards CMIT was, yes, our IT consultants at the time were telling us that our information was being backed up off-site, but what they failed to explain to us in detail was only limited portions of our contracts or materials were being backed up. We were under the impression that we had a complete backup plan, but in essence, only certain email files were being backed up, as well as only certain critical contract files were
And
being
of course, as a non-IT person, you don't even know to ask those questions.
That is correct.
Right. So let me go back to that server being down, and so that's down, and you've lost now maybe 3 hours just to get it back up. Then you got to figure out what the problem is. So it sounds like you're losing, maybe half a day. But once the server's back up, what about the rest of the people in your office? How many people are in your office?
Inside of the corporate office here, we have 20 people that work here.
So when the server's down, what are those 20 people doing?
Twiddling their thumbs, pretty much.
Oh, man.
I have never seen so many people push paper.
Well, and how many people do you have outside of the office that rely on that server?
Upwards to about 300 people outside.
So when your server would go down for 3 or 4 hours, you've got 320 people who are not working for 3 or 4 hours?
It's almost a blackout almost.
Oh,
man.
They
have physical things they can do on site, but to be able to transmit their findings, communicate with us, everything came to a halt.
If it's 3 hours and you got 320 people, that's very close to 1,000 hours per outage. How many outages might you have in a year?
It got one point we were having them on a continual basis in a week. We never knew what we were walking into.
Oh, my gosh. So you could have 50 weeks. Well, let's not say 50. Let's say it was only half that. It was 25. You'd have 25,000 hours. Oh, my gosh. Now, contrast that with what's going on now with CMIT, because as I understand, you're on CMIT's marathon service, so they're monitoring your network 24/7. So the first question is, how often do you have a network go down since CMIT has started working with you?
We haven't had but one outage, and I was notified by CMIT that it went down, and the procedures that they were putting in place to correct that and also bring our server back online. And then
wait a second, it did go down. So what caused it to go down, do you know?
I know there was a adjustment that Microsoft had made with our server, and the fix for it hadn't been put out yet. So CMIT was able to track that down with Microsoft and get the patch put in place so that it would not happen again. I mean, that happened in the middle of the night. They called me on my cell phone to let me know, hey, just to advise you, your server went down. But because we're on that reflections plan with those guys as well, none of our information ever got lost. We automatically switched over to another server, and we were able to keep working. We never even noticed that it happened. I'm no longer the IT guy. I actually get paid to be the transportation manager now. So
since you have been relieved of that and you've now been able to go back to being a transportation manager and really do your job, have you noticed, are there any specific kinds of projects or things you've been able to do, things that you had put on the back burner that you just couldn't get to, that now you can do, that's really making your company more effective and serving your clients better?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Since I've been able to get back into the position of the transportation manager and run our department and provide direction for our personnel effectively now, we've picked up an additional 6 contracts within the last 7 months, just on the transportation side alone.
No, wait a second. How does that compare? You picked up 6 contracts in the last 6 months. What would be and this is during the worst economy ever. So what was, how often would you pick up new contracts before that?
Prior to that, it wasn't that often at all. I mean, and part of that was because we were fishing through a lot of our IT stuff. The 6 contracts probably are somewhere in the ballpark of about $1 to $1.5 million.
Oh my gosh, we've been looking at the wrong piece of the pie here. We've been looking at your out-of-pocket time for the employees down, and then we look at your time that's down. But oh my gosh, if you can bring in 6 contracts and bring your company an extra 1.5 million, I'll take that any day. Eh? They must be pretty happy with you right now, Ennis.
Yes, they are. They are. It's allowed our contracting department as well to be more effective and go after more contracts now.
Sure, everybody's more confident that you can do the job.
We were such in a fog of just trying to survive the day that we couldn't really move forward and be as effective as we needed to be. We needed to get out of that environment, and CMIT helped us get out of that environment. And it's almost as if they put a bubble around us to protect us and help us, be more effective as a company.
So, Ennis, now that CMIT has got your computers working right and you're able to serve your customers better, what does this mean? I mean, we're all interested in how anybody can get the government to be able to save some money. So what are the things that you're able to do now that enable you to do that?
Now that we have CMIT on board and they have kind of solidified our infrastructure, we are able now to go to the government, and we spotted opportunities on their behalf where we see some loss or excessive expenses on their behalf, where we can come in now and show them that we can provide a service for them that will reduce not only their costs, but it will also help us become profitable as a company as well. We can provide that same type of service at a much lower cost and make it just as effective as if they were doing it themselves.
Yeah, I think you just made everybody listening to this call feel a lot better, because we know how tough the economy is. We know that the government is hopefully trained to cut back, but when they cut back, that means sometimes we lose services. But if you can find a way for us to do it more efficiently, then truly everybody wins. The taxpayer wins, the government wins, and you win.
That is correct.
Man, I think CMIT has kind of outdone themselves here. Well, let me just ask you a couple more questions to wrap up. When CMIT took over, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of sensitive issues here, and a lot of people get worried about, geez, how am I ever going to leave my old IT guy and bring on the new person? I mean, how did they make that happen so that you were comfortable that the switchover was going to happen, passwords were going to be protected, everything's going to be done so that, it's going to be a safe and smooth transition?
Because we do provide a lot of government service, we had to identify to them, CMIT, that there had to be some policies put in place to protect a lot of this information. So some of CMIT was required to go through background checks and fingerprinting prior to even coming on board as a consultant for us or as our IT service provider for us. And we then in turn have to provide those documents to the government so that they can validate that CMIT is a legitimate authorized personnel that could have visibility to certain sensitive material. Being that we had those policies in place made us feel a lot more comfortable that when you're dealing with a company such as a CMIT or any type of franchise, you want to make sure that there are security measures in place so that everyone's information is sealed and secure. And they laid that plan out to us. We took that plan back to the government and outlined that with the government, made sure everybody was fingerprinted that had access to the critical information, and it has been smooth sailing since then. With our predecessors on the IT infrastructure, they never gave us a detailed outline of what our IT infrastructure even looked like. CMIT will provide us with a book that's pretty much a manual on every computer in here, every serial number in here, every software in here. It's all outlined. All your passwords are kept in there. Anything that you need should the relationship between us and CMIT not continue for some unknown reason. I could still take this book, hand it off to the next IT person, and they could continue moving as if CMIT was still here.
What's Doug Bates like to work with?
As an individual, I have nothing but high praise for Doug. He came in here and told us what he could do for us, laid out what it may or may not cost us, always gave me a worst-case scenario, never gave me the sugarcoating that, I can fix you in a day and it'll only cost you $2. I never heard that at any point. He always overshoots the mark and says, well, this is what potentially worst-case scenario that it could cost you, but I'm yet to ever see that number.
You mean he actually comes in under budget?
He always comes in under budget. He's always ready and willing to come in and kind of identify, okay, now that you're here, how do we get you to there? Now we're being proactive in identifying, okay, well, we know if we're going to grow anymore that we're going to have to start identifying servers. Our websites will have to be updated. New equipment will have to be brought in. Before, I was also ordering the IT equipment. I mean, we were going down to like Best Buy. No one was able to say, hey, although you can create a masterpiece out of a piece of wood, but doing it with a toothbrush and doing it with a chisel is two different things.
Right.
So, and that's what Doug and them were able to do. They came in and said, well, let us get you armed with the right equipment for the right job.
You've been so gracious with your time, Ennis. Any last thing that you'd want to say to people, just to kind of sum this up of what you think CMIT and Doug Bates' organization has meant to your organization?
I can't really put a price tag. I know if I was to ask Doug, he would say that he's happy to serve. He's very, very knowledgeable and productive, and he'll come in and lay the groundwork. So that experience that we've gained from them has made our IT structure just so much more useful and productive for us as a company. I would definitely recommend them, at the very least, is for someone to come and sit down and talk to them and let Doug and Brian and Angie kind of lay out the groundwork for them as to what service they can actually provide to them. And Doug will sit there and explain to you, yes, I can help you. This is the roadmap. And like I said, it won't be the scenic view roadmap. It will actually be the interstate fast track roadmap for you.